Welcome into the Maine Celtics podcast, episode number 7. Thanks for joining us. MaineCeltics.com, Maine Celtics YouTube page. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel. You don't just get us, Brendan Glashy, Chris Whitney, but also highlights from games, individual player highlights. Best way to keep up with the Maine Celtics, and of course, MaineCeltics.com. Diving into this team, Chris, with 4 games to go. Our guest today is one of the newest members of the team, Joe Wieskamp, who was drafted by the Spurs going back now a couple years ago. Second-round pick of San Antonio, played his first years in the G League with the Austin Spurs. Wieskamp, a second-round pick in 2021. Maine is his 5th team. We dive into all of it. He played his high school ball in Iowa. He grew up in Iowa. He played collegiately at Iowa. So we'll dive into Joe's career. There's a woman in Iowa right now who's just lighting up women's basketball. I think you might know who that is. We'll ask Joe about all of that and how he has settled into the new market for him, which is Portland, Maine. This team, Chris, has caught fire. We did a pod with Jarrell Christian before the team went on the road trip, and they won all 5 games on the trip. They've won 7 of 8. And the Celtics, as of now, would be hosting a first-round home playoff game. As a 3 seed, as a 2, they could get a bye, rest the first round, and then host a second-round game should they get a top 2 seed. Your thoughts, Chris, on how this team has played? A tough rest spot against Greensboro on Thursday, and then they erupted on Sunday. A couple days off goes a long way.
You know, when we talk about our guest and Joe Wieskamp, his team, he comes in just before that road trip that goes on, and he gets into that role and for the feel for the team as they get into that road trip. And, you know, lo and behold, that matches right up with this run they go on, and he just fits the mold of the team so well to come in where he can get his own shot, but he can do help with the other things. But you look at that stretch run, those 2 games they won in Delaware were so huge. And look what it's done to kind of the Blue Coats then. They lost to Indy yesterday. It's kind of sent them a little bit of a spiral. But, you know, the G League, too, it's not just them. The G League, you have guys coming up. You have guys going. They lost one of their best players to an NBA contract right before the Celtics went in to play them. Osceola, Maine goes in. Maine beats Osceola by 16, beats Delaware by, I believe it was 21, and then beats them in overtime. That was your first and second place teams at the time. Now Delaware's dropped down to where they lose that tiebreaker to Maine. They're sitting in that 4 hole, but Maine's in a really good position because, you know, we've talked about the scheduling. Maine doesn't play anybody in the top 6 to finish out the season in these last 4 games. You know, they have last place Westchester coming in. Not that that's anything to look over. We saw what Greensboro did on a tired Maine team, but it's set up right now for them to close out and get a home playoff game. And if people aren't familiar with it, you know, the G League's set up where it's the old school NFL playoffs, right? The first 2 top 2 teams get a bye, and all they got to do is get that 1 win to get into the conference championship game. You know, Maine's in a good spot right now to host a home game either way, whether they come in 1 through 4, but they're in a really good position right now with Indy has to go to Long Island tomorrow and play a back-to-back in Long Island, gets 1 reprieve in a game in between, and then they're at Osceola to close out the season in 2 games there. So those 2 games in themselves, and with the Magic at Birmingham, who've been beating some teams here and there, picking off some teams in the top 6, Maine's in a good spot to where they're not, you know, they're in a good spot for the 2nd seed, but there's a really good chance with the matchups going on that Maine gets up to that 1 seed. But you just want to get that, you know, you want to get a home game, but if you can get a home game with a bye too, we saw the other night, like you just touched on, Maine plays in Delaware on a Wednesday, flies home Thursday morning, gets in at 12:30 and has to lace them up against Greensboro that night for a 7 o'clock tip. Guys are already in the building, we shoot around at 5. And you could just see it. They had a great first half, had the lead at halftime, and just the wheels came off. And you could just see the guys just gasp from the overtime game the night before, the energy that took out. They were without J.D. Davison as well. So you had guys that had to handle more. You know, DJ Stewart was playing more of that point guard by himself. Peterson had to play point guard when DJ had to go out. So it was a tough one. You could see it in the second half there, but they came out and flexed their muscles there in the second game against Greensboro. And Maine's sitting pretty right now for a big playoff run for the people here in Portland.
Yeah, a lot to still unfold with this regular season. Osceola is 19-9, pacing the East, a 1.5 lead on Indiana, 2-game lead on Maine, your current 3 seed. And with 28 games, they still have 6 to go, whereas the Celtics, they have 4 to go, 1 more at home, Thursday night, Westchester. Sellout warning, it's getting close, so get your tickets now at MaineCeltics.com for the regular season home finale. Then Maine goes to College Park for a pair of games. They're still in the picture to possibly squeeze in as a 6 seed or a 5 seed. Really, it could be anything, but in all likelihood, College Park still has something to play for. They're not out of it yet. And then Joe Wieskamp's former team this year, it's been on 4 other teams, but his most recent former team is Texas, the Legends of the Western Conference. That is the regular season finale for the Celtics. Playoff start. If there indeed is a home playoff game in the first round, that would be the first week of April. So stay tuned. Don't want to confuse the audience because they could very well get a bye and then not play.
And you know, it's March Madness season. The playoff brackets, bracketology, all that stuff's over with now. It's March Madness in the college level, but you haven't seen madness until you've seen the G League playoffs when only 6 teams are getting in. So right now you have 6 other teams below that 6 fighting just to get in this last week with 4 games to go. And then it's single elimination where it's just game, night off to get to the division final. And then you get to the G League championship and you go to a best of 3. But it's complete madness when it comes to how the G League playoffs are set up.
Yeah, I like your NFL comp. It's exactly right. The former NFL setup, 12 teams get in, 6 from each conference, top 2 buys, 3 and 4 host, 5 and 6 travel, and it's single elim. So tiebreaker-wise, you go head-to-head, which we discussed. Indiana, Maine's got the edge there. Delaware, they've got the edge there. Osceola's a split, 1-1. So the next tiebreaker would not be point differential. It would be a record against Eastern Conference teams, and that is why Eastern Conference playoff teams. That's why it's important to note that Maine's sitting pretty because they don't have to play any more playoff teams. So yes, there could be room for more growth, but there's also no room for error because they don't have to worry about that particular tiebreaker, and their record in that spot is pretty good. The identity of this team, when we came back from the road trip, when the Celtics came back from the road trip and we did a game on Thursday, in the 6-game win streak, Maine had the number one defensive rating, one of the top net ratings in the league, defensive rebounding. I think that was the last episode we did with Jarrell. We talked about, let's watch this team and how they acknowledge and improve on the defensive glass. And that's been notable, whether it be Neemias Queta coming down, Kyler Kelly in a starting role. There's more comfort there. You have to manage your mindset coming off the bench versus starting, but Kelly and Banks, and you were very impressed with how Banks played on Sunday, even though he wasn't all that great on Thursday, and no one really was except DJ Stewart. We'll get to DJ in a second. But the defensive identity has remained true with this team. Even though they lost on Thursday, Chris, they still held the team, Greensboro, under 100 points.
It was, we've watched, the big thing we've seen is Kyler Kelly, right? The start of the year, you and I talked, a lot of people talked about it. This team wasn't a defensive juggernaut by any means. And we all worried about, we were like, wow, they're going to score a ton of points, but are they going to give up more points than they score? Now it's all of a sudden, just credit to Coach Miller. He's got them to where they're playing a team defensive effort that's just unbelievable. But Kyler Kelly started off as kind of the guy off the bench behind Banks. And I don't know where the chip on his shoulder came from, or I'd love to talk to him and just see, hey, where's this coming from? Because we've watched him just take off like a rocket. And all of a sudden, he's just this defensive monster where he's anchoring the defense. He's a rim protector, correct? He's got 85 blocks this season, which leads the G League overall with total blocks. But that's almost 20 more than second place. So it's just like his rim protection, his rebounding is great. But then the whole season as a whole, we've seen how the backcourt, your Petersons, your Stewarts, now your Wieskamps, even JD, all these guys are getting in on the glass. They team rebound on it. And if, teams are going to key in on Kyler and taking him and boxing him out, or even, Banksy, when he comes in, they're going to take him off the glass. The other guys are crashing the boards hard. And it's just a great team effort. And that stuff is what's leading to them to be able to control the pace of games because they get the glass. But when you have a guard that comes out with the rebound, they're just off and running it. It's just an outlet pass to another guard. They have so many different weapons in that. But, and then just to have the bench they have with Slater that comes in, he's turning into that energy guy, the grit guy. You can see it in his face. He's the one looking to the crowd. He's the one looking to everybody. And then you're bringing in, a 600-plus game NBA veteran, Tony Snell, who he'll spot start when he needs to, like he did in Delaware, but he'll come off the bench. You see him diving on the floor, throwing his body around. He's playing, he's getting into the rebounding action. He's getting in and mucking it up. And that's a leadership thing when guys see that, like, hey, if I'm going to do that, and you can see the other day, we just had, the last game, we talked about it. He dove on the floor for a ball that was about to go out of bounds. They got a timeout call, and you could see the guys. There was the guys on the bench. Everybody was going to pick up Tony, and the energy picked up from there. So it's just one of those things where they've got the leadership now. they've just got this roster that really just gels. Everybody does a little bit of everything. And I told you on Saturday or Sunday, I thought Banks was the player of the game. And he only had 8 points, but he had 8 points, 8 rebounds. He had his hands in his tips. He was stealing balls. He was deflecting balls. He was a really big difference, and he fouled out too. So he's not wasting any space there either. But his energy and the way he works, if you can have him and Kelly in the middle, that's a big thing. Then you talk about Keta. He's coming down every now and then. When Neemias comes down, all of a sudden it's like, you have the leading shot blocker, and you have the leading shot blocker, and whom I'm going to guess that Kyler's going to be up for Defensive Player of the Year in the G League. Suddenly he's coming off the bench. It's just like DJ Stewart. he's scored 20 plus in like the last 8 games. A lot of those games he's coming off the bench, so it's guys understanding roles, guys doing the little things and not having, it's not a me thing. And that's a lot, you'll see it. I think Joe will touch on it too. It's just the fact that a lot of teams will have those guys that need the ball. But in Maine, it doesn't seem there's a guy that needs the ball. When he feels it, we saw it in the fourth quarter, with Peterson, he kind of took over that fourth quarter as Greensboro got back into it. He took over a little bit. He knocked down shots. He extended that lead out. He kind of pulled them away in that win. You'll see JD take over games and stuff like that. But they have that, but they play such a good team basketball game. And I think it fits Maine as a whole, just the people of Maine. They like that. They like the grittiness. And it's a really great product to see. And I'm really happy to see the fact that we're probably going to extend this into the playoff season in the G League.
And it really fits what it sounds so cliche, and I think it's the goal of all 31 franchises, soon to be 32 with the Phoenix Suns acquiring a G League team. But it really does, it fits what Boston does. When someone's out for Boston due to rest, it just happened on Monday. We're recording the week after they just beat the Pistons, and they beat the Wizards the night before. I know the Wizards and the Pistons aren't good teams. But when you have Jason Tatum, who you basically have to like glue him to a chair so he doesn't play. He doesn't like taking nights off.
Right.
But you got Brown and Porzingis as your 2 core guy, and Derek White, who had a triple-double. Should not mention him. And then you got Hauser goes for 30 last week in the game. Peyton Pritchard has excelled as a backup. But the same kind of patterns where it doesn't matter who's available each night. Jaden Springer, who we're familiar with his game, seeing him in the G League. Springer had some nice moments getting involved on loose balls, cutting off ball, offensive rebound putbacks. And he's not the biggest guy on the floor, but it's very similar to how Maine has tried to build it here. If Kata's not here, well, hey, we got 2 centers. It's almost unfair to James Banks, who's put together a great season, 60 block shots. Kyler Kelly, I just looked this up too. Kyler Kelly last year was on 2 teams. He was with 905 and Austin. When he was in Mississauga last year, he was acquired in January from the player pool. He played in 21 games, had 26 blocks. This year, he's played in 40 games. And to your point, he's blocked, well, including the showcase, he's blocked more than 100 shots. But in regular season action, he's blocked 85 shots. So he's averaging more than 3 blocks a game. So I just think we'll talk about this with Joe quite a bit. Joe Wieskamp, our guest this week on the Maine Celtics podcast. Role acceptance and how Boston really has tried to mimic the same mindset at this level. It's not just about the individual who has to role accept, but from a team construct and from a team identity standpoint, you see the parallels on a night-to-night basis. Let's talk DJ Stewart before we welcome our guest, Joe Wieskamp. DJ Stewart named NBA G League Player of the Week, 8 straight games where he has scored at least 20 points. In 7 of 8, he has dropped 25 plus. DJ is another example of this, Chris. J.D. Davison gets the call to join Boston. He goes to Phoenix, goes to Utah, goes to Portland. He gets a chance to be on the trip with the team. DJ slides in. It's seamless as the starting point guard and can play off ball and with the ball.
I mean, let's be honest. Like if DJ Stewart's on a lot of the teams in the G League, DJ Stewart's going to be that starting guard. He's not going to be coming off the bench, but I think he prefers it. He likes it. And at the same time, for a team that has to go out and guard JD for the first 5 minutes of the game with Peterson and Walsh on the wings, then all of a sudden you bring in DJ, and it's just, I mean, and you talk about, like we were just talking about in Boston, just the kind of the roles and how they can go in. You got a Peyton Pritchard who could go in, and I think Peyton Pritchard is the perfect spot for where he is, where he bangs out his 20, 25 minutes, we'll call it. And it's a solid 20, 25 minutes. He doesn't have to take any time off to rest his body or like that. And that's what's so big with this Maine team is you got a DJ who can come off the bench comfortably. He can start comfortably. He can play off the ball comfortably. He can be on the ball comfortably. He's going to go in and rebound. But he's just put on an absolute show these last 8 games, and he's an unbelievable finisher. And I kept talking about that because I was watching the games on the road, and he'll go into traffic, and you have no idea how it is. He's not the biggest of dudes, but he gets it done at the rim, and he's shooting from deep too. You see him taking step backs from 3 or 4 feet behind the 3-point line. Sometimes I kind of get a little antsy when it first goes up, but he's shooting 54% from the field, like in that time.
That's the most impressive part to me.
It's not like a big man where he's in the paint. It's a little flip, it's little flip floaters, and he's right at the rim. I mean, he's shooting balls with guys in his face. You've seen he did it in Portland the other day, just a step back 3 from cool and calm from 4 feet behind the 3-point line. This guy's shooting over 50% from the floor in this time frame. So truly deserving of the player of the week. The numbers show it, but his attitude shows it too. He's always smiling. He's always there for the high fives and stuff. He's a great teammate, and he's what I think Boston, if they look down, the higher ups are looking down into Portland, they just kind of lick their chops because there is a whole roster of guys here that fit that mold up in Boston. I don't think there's anyone from Portland that couldn't slide down to Boston right now, sit on that bench and feel uncomfortable, out of place, or they wouldn't fit in any means. It's just a really good group, and I think that's what's helped over this time frame and that road trip was the fact that everybody gets along, but a lot of that is the versatility of the roster and your DJ Stewards that accept their role and they can go out and do what they can do, and they're going to do it happily for whatever coach needs.
And he impacted winning his first G League stop. So he was at Duke 2021 season and 2020, 2021, one and done after that year. Goes to Stockton where he was a starter. Then he does have experience as a reserve at the pro level. But looking at his splits, he was a 44% shooter, improved to 45. This year in Maine, 47 for the season. He shot 34% from 3 his first G League year in Stockton. That rose to 37. He's back at 37 this year. So the numbers keep going up for DJ. Clutch shot making, and like you said, in this stretch, shooting about 55% from the floor has been very impressive. And you got to think that's the other thing. Like, how do you game plan this Maine team if you've got DJ and JD and Drew, and we'll talk to Joe Wieskamp when he's back. It is a tough team to guard based on their weaponry on the perimeter and guys that are interchangeable who can handle the ball, play off the ball. They've done a pretty good job with this roster. Joe Wieskamp is our guest this week on the Maine Celtics podcast. 5 games in the month of March, all on the road. 3rd most points on the team per game at 15.6. He's shooting 48% from 3. We actually do dive into Joe. He was in a slump shooting it. He was below 30% with Texas. He dives into how he feels this roster has fit him and the basketball background. Here's our guest on the Maine Celtics podcast, episode 7, the newest member of the team, Joe Wieskamp. And we welcome in our next guest to the Maine Celtics podcast. He's one of the newer members of the Maine Celtics this season, Joe Wieskamp. His 3rd year in the NBA G League. He came over before the All-Star break from the Texas Legends. Joe, thanks for making some time, and how are things going so far for you in Portland, Maine?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. It's been a great start. Obviously, I've only been here for a little while, but it's a great team to be a part of, great coaching staff. And obviously, we've made a run since I've been here and making a playoff push. And so it's just a good group of guys to be around.
When the Celtics won 6 straight games just before their weekend series with Greensboro, Joe was a big part of the trip, averaged about 16 points a game, 9 boards, 48% from 3, 55% overall. Let's just talk about, I want to get to your path in the G League in a moment, but with this team, 9 games in for you played with this team, how do you fit the roster construction here?
I think I fit really well. Obviously, we have 2 really good point guards with JD and DJ. Guys that can get their own shot, but also create shots for us wings. And I think Blaine does a great job of just putting me in positions to, come off screens and just run off different actions that creates, openings for me to get my shot off. And so I think, and then obviously we have some good bigs too with Kyler and James and when Nimi plays with us. So whether they're, doing a dribble handoff, they're setting screens for me, I just feel like I fit this team really well.
You've done your fair share of bouncing around. It's now your 5th team in 3 years. And when we had Jarrell Christian on, he was our last guest on the pod. He talks about when there are twists and turns to a season, you make tweaks to a roster. Here and there, you might find an opportunity to find a diamond in the rough. And you weren't shooting it great, and you've been shooting it superb rate since you've been in Maine. But when you got the call from Jarrell, take us through the mindset of a G League player. There have been documentaries out the last couple of years on the life that you guys live and the bouncing around. You were a second-round pick of the San Antonio Spurs, and you've bounced around. How do you stay even-keeled with moving city to city, even with just one team? Now you've been on 5.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part that some people don't realize, especially for myself. I'm married. I have a 3-month-old baby and 2 dogs. So just the logistics of everything can be tough, constantly moving around. And so I'm just thankful to have the support. My wife is really good about it. She handles things well, and just our families as well. Like when I initially came out here, she just went home and stayed with her parents, and her mom really helped out with the baby. So we definitely couldn't do it without that support. But just to be here in Maine now, I wasn't in the best situation in Texas. And so I just feel like this team just fits my game so much better. Obviously, I wasn't shooting it well down there, but it was just such a different style of play. I was more so just standing in the corner. We had a couple really ball dominant guards that were looking to get theirs. And so it just wasn't a great situation. And just, here we just play much better team basketball. And yes, I'm very thankful to be here.
And all of the things you just brought up, besides the last part there about shooting, those are all family, day-to-day, real-life issues or real-life obstacles that you have to go through, and we haven't even dived into the basketball side of it. So when you play with guys, like you said, JD, DJ, who can alternate handling the ball, Drew can set up with some lobs inside as well. So it's looked really good when you've been out there with the Maine Celtics this season. When you got the draft, there's a connection with the Celtics organization with Derek White, was a former San Antonio Spur. He played in Austin, was in the G League, and now he's having an excellent year. We're recording on a Tuesday. D. White played against the Pistons last night, had his first career triple-double, and look what kind of player he's turned into. So just take us back to draft night a few years back now when you were drafted out of Iowa and the Spurs gave you the phone call. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, obviously super excited. Just the whole pre-draft process is long, and you're working out for a lot of teams. So you don't truly know where you're going to go until that night. But just a lot of excitement, a lot of, hard work. Felt like it was being paid off. But that was really just the beginning. As you can tell, my journey since being drafted has been a bit crazy. And I think it's just everyone's story, everyone's journey is just different. And sometimes, especially for a shooter, it just takes getting into the right situation, right opportunity at the right time. And I feel like it can take, a few years. You look at Max Strus, he played in the G League for a little bit. And then once he got his opportunity, he just excelled. So I think everyone's timing is just different. And I think, I've just continued to develop and take each situation and learn from it. And I feel like my game's continuing to grow. Obviously, the start of the season isn't how I wanted it to go. But I think, as you can see now, me being in a good situation with an offense and a coach that, values me and puts me in positions to get those different shots up on the move, you're seeing my numbers go up and the team's success go up as well.
So you were in Austin first, then you ended up with Wisconsin and 905 last year. You shot 40% from 3 last year with those 2 teams, and then you were in Texas to start this season. Important, we hear this all the time when it comes to shooting at the NBA level or any professional level. Short-term memory, is that what you try to carry with you night to night?
Yeah, 100%. I heard Duncan Robinson say it, on a podcast. The averages are, the numbers are going to average out. Like, you can have a game where you're going to go 0 for 10. You can have the next game you're going to go 8 for 10. And so I just believe that I'm, a 40% three-point shooter, and just over the course of the season, those numbers are going to average out.
That's how it kind of started for you here. You had a great game where you're 6 of 9, then one night you go 1 of 7, and it's just kind of how those. But that's the beauty of this roster construction in Maine. And there's a little bias for the Maine Celtics podcast, understandably, but the big thing that's been preached, Chris Whitney, who does the games with me on the broadcast, and we'll be doing the pod. We do the pod together. We talk about this, and Jarrell Christian's talked about this. Even Blaine Miller, who's in his first year here, role acceptance is big at this level. When you have an NBA franchise like Boston that is contending for championships, the role acceptance in the G League is so crucial, because the goal of each individual of the 13 guys on the team is, how can you impact winning for the Boston Celtics? And Sam Hauser has excelled in that role. He worked on his defense. We knew he was a great shooter at Virginia. Comes to the G League, erupts as a shooter, but improves defensively. Luke Cornett as a pick and roll big, defensively, offensively. His role acceptance has allowed him to succeed in Boston. Well, how much was that discussed when you were acquired, about role acceptance and hey, if we're taking a chance on you, we think you have a fit at the next level for our current construct at the NBA level? Right.
And that's what I came into this situation with, the same mindset. Is the Celtics have always been a team that, even since, pre-draft, have valued me and have seen a future. So just coming in here, like you said, role acceptance, realizing that they have Jason Tatum, they have Jaylen Brown, they have guys that can get them 30 on every night. So you got to come in there and be great at your role, be a knockdown shooter, be a good defender, be a connector, a guy that can, make the right play, not turn the ball over, not try to do too much. And I think that's what some guys struggle with in the G League, is thinking that those GMs are looking for you to score 30 every night, which isn't the case. They have those guys. And so just being great in your role. And I think so far, ever since being here, like, I've been able to do that and look to continue to do that to finish the season.
Let's talk about your roots. You're from Muscatine. I hope I said that right. Muscatine, Iowa. What's there to do in Muscatine?
Not a whole lot. Pretty small town.
Not a whole lot. Well, you had to have done something.
Yeah, a lot of basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing too crazy.
Well, okay, along those lines, you had a great high school career. 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year in Iowa. You left high school in 2018 as the state's all-time leading scorer. And then you found your way to Iowa to play at the next level. Was that always your plan, to stay in your home state at the high school level, of course, and then to try and play in your home state collegiately?
Yeah, I grew up just being a Hawkeye fan, lived 30, 45 minutes away from campus, had a really good relationship with Coach McCaffrey. And so as soon as they offered me, I pretty much knew that's where I wanted to go. Obviously, it's cool if I would have waited it out and seen how many offers I could get. But at the end of the day, you're only going to one school, and I felt very comfortable going there.
Must have been pretty fun to play with some bigs like the Murray brothers, and watching those guys thrive at the next level, Detroit and in Sacramento.
Yeah, obviously super happy for those guys. Luka's with Minnesota now, Chris in Portland, and
Garza, yep.
Yeah, Keegan in Sacramento. So it's cool to see those guys, have success.
I'm sure you're aware there's a pretty good women's basketball player at that school right now. Are you familiar with Caitlyn Clark?
Yeah, I am. She's very impressive to watch.
Do you? So of course you watch your team. In your team, we're recording on Tuesday. Your team's playing tonight. The Iowa's playing in the NIT tonight to represent the Big Ten, and the Big Ten's got some teams in the tournament for this coming March Madness. How much do you still sink your teeth into the current Iowa Hawkeyes, men's and women's?
Yeah, I watch every game I can.
Yeah. Obviously
not the year that the men had hoped for, but they have a lot of young talent that I'm excited about. Owen Freeman, Brock Hardy, and I think that duo has the potential to be really, really good for the next few years. So as unfortunate as it was, I think there's some promise moving forward.
Is it fair to say that you and Caitlyn Clark, based on your high school track record and your Gatorade Players of the Year, is it fair to say that you're both the two GOATs of Iowa basketball?
I don't know about that. I'd say a lot of people would say Luka, just because of the career that he had at Iowa, getting the Player of the Year and all those accolades. But that's up for other people to decide.
Do you still? I mean, you just said you try to tune in when you can. Do you still talk to people on campus? How big is the Caitlyn Clark hype? And she's going to the WNBA draft very soon in about a month. But how actual, like, seeing some of the crowds that pile up for these games, the sellouts they've been putting together, for Caitlyn's games. Is the hype real? Is she really the talk of the town?
Yeah, it's real for sure. My wife was back in Iowa and went to their senior night, and she just said she's never seen Carver that crazy for a game. And you can see it all over social media, right? The fans are lining up
Right.
hours before the games and selling out. Ticket prices are outrageous. So it's really impressive what she's doing for women's sports.
Very good. We have Joe Wieskamp joining us here on the Maine Celtics podcast. You mentioned you have a couple of dogs. The good news is the weather's getting better in Portland, and some of these restaurants and breweries, wherever you find yourself, they're pretty dog friendly. So have you had a chance to get outside yet? The weather, it turns out since you've joined the team, the weather is actually getting better, and there is a spring. There is a spring and a summer in Portland, Maine. It's not just freezing cold and snowing all the time.
That's another one of the things that's, tough logistically, right? I came here middle of February, and so it just wasn't worth the drive to get the dogs out here. So they're actually still back in Iowa with my wife's parents. Oh. So I haven't seen my dogs in like a month and a half. So definitely missing them. And this is actually my wife and little guy just came out last week. So this is their first time being out here. They're here until Sunday. So we're trying to enjoy it. We're going to a lot of good restaurants, walking down, Old Port and exploring different shops and things like that. So it's been fun to have them here and explore a little bit.
Well, it's interesting too, because I'm sure a lot of FaceTime calls then. FaceTime is occupying your cell phone quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every night, all day we're FaceTiming. So it's tough to be on the road and be alone, but to be in a better basketball situation, it's been absolutely worth it for me.
And to your point, since you've arrived, Maine's been on the road a lot. They had that 5-game trip, and you were a big part of that, as we talked about earlier. So you really have, actually, the more I think about it, you haven't had a real chance to really digest the city of Portland. Some time off here with the game on Thursday coming up against Westchester. Some personal goals for you, Joe. Of course, trying to settle into one place, as we hit on. You've been on 5 teams now. What are some personal goals for you, not just for the rest of this year, but as you work your way towards the end of this G League season, and then what might be on the horizon for the summer and beyond? What are some things that you're keeping in mind on a day-to-day basis, long-term?
Yeah, I mean, right now, just focus on finishing out the season strong, and I think that will kind of lead us into the next step. I'm not sure what this summer is going to bring, but obviously my goal is to get back to the NBA, and so whatever I can do to make that happen, whether that's going to, mini camps in the summer, playing summer league potentially, whether that's with the Celtics or not, I'm not sure yet. And just kind of see what, happens throughout this summer, maybe go to training camp with the team and, try to get a 2-way, try to get a roster spot. And so that's my goal at the end of the day, is to get back to the NBA. And I think I'm going to work really hard this offseason and just see where it takes us.
You mentioned Coach McCaffrey at Iowa. Who are some of your other mentors? Just thinking of this team, you haven't had a lot of time to get to know some of the personnel yet, but Tony Snell has been an NBA player for 9 years. He knows what it takes to carve out a role and be part of winning at the NBA level, earning roles across the league. Who are some of your mentors outside of Coach McCaffrey?
One of the biggest ones was Doug McDermott. Being in San Antonio my rookie year, playing under a guy that's very similar to me from Iowa, can shoot it really well, but can also get downhill and finish at the rim, which I think obviously I'm labeled as a shooter, but I think I'm able to do more than that and, finish, create around the rim. So just being able to watch him every single day in practice, and, he would give me little tips, just, how to square your feet on this, how, when you're running off this way, just little things like that, I think was really huge for me my rookie year.
We noticed that firsthand. One of your first games in Maine, you had a couple of blocks in the first half, stole the ball a couple times. So it was noticed right away. And that's a theme of this Maine team, right? Is what are some of the things you keep in mind mentally throughout the course of a game defensively? This team has prided itself on the defensive end and using defense to fuel offense.
This is probably the best defensive team and most connected team that I've been on in the G League. So it's fun to play. Like, this is honestly the most fun I've had playing in the G League, just being around this group of guys. I think Blaine and the staff have really done a great job. Every game they're getting us prepared well, and every game it's different, how we're guarding different teams based on their personnel. And I think guys are, responding well in game. And I think we're just playing well off each other. We're rotating, finishing possessions with rebounds, and that's leading to us getting out in transition and getting easy points that way.
We'll get you out on this. What have you made of the atmosphere of the Expo? It's only been a handful of games, but we were there. You didn't play in the game Sunday on St. Patrick's Day, but they packed the place.
Yeah, it's a good atmosphere. I didn't know what to expect coming out here, but it's definitely a good atmosphere. They bring a lot of energy, and it's fun to play here.
All right, Joe Wieskamp, thanks so much for spending some time. It's a great way for the fans to get to know you since you're a new arrival to the team. You joined the team after the All-Star break. Best of luck here down the stretch, and thanks for hopping on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Good stuff from Joe Wieskamp, diving into some personal stuff, too. I mean, 5 teams in 3 years, not easy to do, and Joe is 24. It's a second-round pick. He's bounced around, and he was pretty forthright about the fit in Texas. Now I'm intrigued to see how Joe performs against his former team to wrap up the season against the Texas Legends. But Chris, what was your main takeaway from the conversation with Joe?
He's just, you can tell, and again, we keep talking about roles and that, you can just tell from his personality. He's got a 3-month-old. So he's doing this where he doesn't, he's not going home every night to his wife and child, he's had to be separated.
He's probably not partaking in the 2K stuff that we talked about.
No, he's not, but you could see it where that, you talk about the gamers and stuff too, that, he has his teammates to lean on too, being away from his family, the transitioning around the country and having that, but he's got his family in town now. He's able to hang with them and see them. And I can understand as a dad being away from your kids for that long, but it's he's just his personality and he gets it. And the one thing that sticks out to me is just what he talked about when you asked him about his goals. It wasn't like, hey, I just want to go to the league. Like he gets it. Like, hey, I'd like to get back to the league, maybe do some summer league, get to a mini camp, get to a training camp spot, whether it's get to a 2-way, but he has it staged up. It's not like, hey, it's NBA or bust. He sees, and he's going to be that guy that's going to work his way to get there rather than just, hey, this is what I want. This is the only thing I'm going to take, so he accepts that. So that was really refreshing to see. And that's why he's going to be so successful at this level and have that chance to get back into the league, just given the fact that he understands the work it's going to take to get there. And he understands it's not going to be overnight. This is a work in progress. He's going to have to progress his way through to get through in someone's roster at the NBA level.
Yeah, I think it's one thing when guys are drafted, 1st-round pick, 2nd-round pick, or undrafted free agent. Like if you get to the league and it sticks and you don't have to go down, that's great. Like nothing wrong with that. But I think we learn in this league, especially when you're in some regard, this is because it's going to come off as a criticism, but it's not. It's just the reality. It's sort of a reclamation project. You can't take shortcuts because everything they thought of you in 2021, they probably still think of you in talking Maine, because Joe said it. They were interested in me around the draft. So there's clearly been interest in you. But when an opportunity presents itself based on the current roster construct, and you've got 3 2-ways already, you've got an assignment player in Jordan Walsh, role acceptance, and Joe hit on that. And he's admired guys like Doug McDermott, for example, who have done well. Luka Garza, who has thrived at the G League level. I brought up the Derek White thing because Derek White even admits, like, I didn't think I'd be in the NBA. So good things come to you if you stick to the process and don't try to take shortcuts. And Joe realizes, hey, I go to a winning culture and I don't have to go to a place and drop 30. Well, that's great. Maybe if your individual stat line, you drop 30 and then they give you a call up. And if you don't fit and you don't play the game the right way and impact winning, then you're like everybody else. You're expendable.
It is. And you got to think too, at the same time, you have your 3 2-ways in a G League roster, but everyone else, you're free game for around the league. So yeah, the Celtics may say, hey, this is what we like about you, so
sure. What
are you going to work on to fix, to add to that? And then everybody else around the NBA, it's like, you can't take a night off because you're being looked at by every NBA, affiliated roster spot that could come about, whether it's a 10-day or they're just looking to sign you, but you can't have a weakness. So Boston might like you for this, Chicago might like you for that, the Lakers might like you for this, but how are you going to put it all together so you're that complete package guy so when you get there, you can fit to any roster you go to? And that's what I think's really great about the G League is the fact that, you do have the extra guys on those other 12 guys on the team that in taking away the assignment players like a Jordan Walsh, who's a Celtics contract is down. All these other guys, and we saw it last year with Lukas Samanic. He got signed the night before the playoff game, which really burnt Maine in the long run. They took their leading scorer and boop, he's gone the night before to go out to Utah. But that's the thing is Joe gets it to where, hey, they liked me coming out of the draft. How can I add to that? But he's also going to add to all the different fits for every NBA team there is. It's not just he's in Maine, yes, playing in the Boston organization, but at any point in time, any other organization come in and be like, hey, Joe, we'd like to, look at you. What are you going to do? So they can't take a night off. They can't take a play off. Always got to be there, and you got to keep working.
Yeah, and outside of having the stability of a two-way and being connected directly to the next level, the luxury of being a G League guy is, let's just face it here, like teams around the league pay attention to what Boston does because they've married the two, Portland and Boston. There's a marriage where it connects to both levels. So point being, if you do well in your situation in Maine as a G League contract player, an Exhibit 10 player, whatever it may be, teams around the league are noticing that because they're like, well, Boston's doing something right with their player development, whether it was Danny Ainge going years back, Austin, his son, is in the organization, Brad Stevens, what he's done to build it, as well as Joe Mazzulla and Blaine Miller, who's impacted winning, developed players when he first started with the Bucks organization. They notice that stuff, that if you fit what they're doing, okay, what teams around the league think, what are we missing or what are they doing with this player that could maybe help us at the next level? So good stuff from Joe. And again, we haven't seen him much in Maine because the team's been on the road and he was out the last couple of games. So I'm excited to see how Joe finishes up the season in a Maine uniform and what is in store for him for the rest of his career. 4 games to go, as we said at the top of the show. Westchester Thursday night, NBC Sports Boston. We'll have the broadcast, our radio partner, 96.3 The Big Jab. We're also on ESPN+. So those of you not in the New England market, you can also find us there on Thursday, the last game at the Expo in the regular season. Then 3 games to go. So, Chris, we'll leave it with this. A lot to shake out. We did this, so we're guilty of it. Trying to figure out they're going to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed or a 3 seed or a 4. In all likelihood, it's a top 3 seed based on tiebreakers. Let's look ahead, though, crystal ball, for this team to take home the title. They got to go through the East first and then match up with the West team, which right now in the West, Stockton is your 1 seed at 20-9. We saw Sioux Falls, the Miami Heat G League team, here in Maine, going back. They're the 2 seed, and then there's a drop-off, Santa Cruz, Austin, Oklahoma City, a team Maine beat twice in the regular season, Oklahoma City. What does this team have to do to win a championship if they are championship ready in the G League?
First, they got to stay the course, right? We've seen how they came out in the Greensboro first half and played, and I think that was what you're seeing. That's like peak Maine Celtics basketball right there, where just everything, shots are going down, they're moving the ball, getting the open shots, getting a touch in the paint, working the ball around, but they can't regress in any means. They can't there's 4 games to go. It can't be, the season's almost done. Because you got guys, again, that the 2-way guys, hey, the season's over. I'm going to go back up to Boston, finish the season with them, be around that organization. Then the other guys are like, I need a break. They like Joe's been away from his family. He can be one of those things where like, 2 more weeks, and I can get back and be with the family, that kind of thing. It's going to be a mental war more than anything. You got Westchester coming in, they're struggling. You can't take that game off. You got to put your foot to the metal and you got to be competing all 48 minutes. And it's going to be like that for all, until they close out and they are locked into a seed, you can't relax, and that's going to be the big thing is mentally, hey, can we come in, take care of our bodies away from the court, away from the games, between games, because they are going to go on, they're going to play Thursday, but the last 3, they're going to go on the road. It's only 2 stops, but you're talking about the last one being in Texas. So it's one of these things where there's going to be some travel, but it's going to be them playing Maine basketball, and that's doing the little things, just like the James Banks the other day, hands in the passing lane, getting some steals, choosing the pace, when they can get out and run. If the, in the offensive set, I talk about it all the time, and you and I get in that conversation on there, is the fact that it can't be their offensive sets and their half court offense can't be dictated by the other team. They got to get the ball movement. They got to get the ball moving. We've seen how they struggle when it's just kind of dribbling around by one person, that isolation late in the shot clock. Then we make a pass and that you're just hanging your buddy out to dry and he's got to hurry up a shot. Like, it's got to be pace, ball movement, and then just doing those little things. Keep up the rebounding, Kelly's going to have to be, still be the anchor, but Banksy's going to have to be there to protect him. If a guy's having a bad shooting night, someone else is going to step up. But I just think the way the roster is built right now, Coach Miller has so many weapons where if someone is struggling, you can cut those minutes back a little bit and keep him in the lineup if you wanted to because of the weapons he has around him to kind of get him into that positive look in that way. But so it's just, I think mentally is where this team's going to have to come in. They have all the physical tools and they have all the weapons and they're so deep. It's just going to be mentally, hey, let's close out the season. Let's get to the playoffs and let's make a little run here. So, it's that. And I think one thing that could be sold is the fact that guys like, hey, listen, like there's only going to be 12 teams left at the end of this regular season. And then all of a sudden you switch into the playoffs where more NBA eyes are able to see you live at one time. Yep. So when you're that player at the end of the season, like we've seen a lot of 10 days get signed all of a sudden right here towards the end of the regular season. Teams want to get some rest for guys get down, however you want to work it. It's a big thing right now. Hey guys, let's get a good seed and let's make a playoff run because the deeper you go into the playoffs, there's less G League teams playing and that's more eyeballs just set right on your game live. And you could be seen by someone that hadn't seen you all year. They were just looking at stat lines and analytics. So that's the big thing. It's for me, Maine's just going to close out the season mentally strong and just be prepared to go and take care of yourself.
Yeah, the blueprint, I think, from Sunday on St. Patrick's Day when the second game against Greensboro took place, built a 23-point lead in the first half. They weren't shooting it great from the opening tip, but Celtics didn't turn the ball over. They had 1 or 2 turnovers in the first half, so that's mentally staying strong. You mentioned the James Banks deflections. Tony Snell dives on the floor. Your 32-year-old, nine-year veteran is the one setting tone. Brandon Slater, we should give him a shout-out too. He brings it every night from the bench, even if he's not getting in on nights with Walsh there and Peterson and Wieskamp when he's back. Brandon Slater, to me, has still found a way to soak up every ounce of his 15 minutes a night that he might get, whether it be open threes or be, in some cases this year, when Kelly and Banks were both dealing with an injury or the flu was going around, Slater would slide in and play the 5. So everyone has been opportunistic, remain that way. But as we've hit on, defense has carried this team's identity. So when the ball isn't going in, this is a good 3-point shooting team, top 10 in makes, takes, percentage. If the ball's not going in, their commitment defensively is going to still allow them to be in games and win games late. And like we say in Boston, too, at the end of these tight games, and there haven't been many in Boston this year because they've been rolling teams, when you get late in games, let the ball keep moving and be multiple, which they've proven to do. It doesn't have to be Stewart who handles the ball at the end. It can be JD. It could be Drew Peterson throwing it up to Kelly. We saw that in those Delaware games. So remaining opportunistic individually, which all connects to the bigger goal of winning a championship. So they're in a good spot. They've played very well here down the stretch. Winners in 7 of their last 8 games. The Maine Celtics, again, play Thursday night, their last regular season home game. Get your if you're tuning into this now, it might be late, but tickets are winding down. Tickets are limited at this point now for Thursday's regular season finale. 2 games at College Park, 1 game in Frisco, Texas against the Legends to wrap the regular season. And one last point to Chris's point, when we hit April, there's about a 20-day window from the start of the G League playoffs until the end of the NBA regular season. You could look at teams at the very top, like your Bostons, Oklahoma City, Denver, just looking at both conferences, that both mostly have things locked up. Then you've got your teams in the basement, Detroit, Charlotte, San Antonio out west. There's an evaluation period where teams kind of know their destiny at this point, whether they're going to be a 1 seed or they're going to be picking at the top of the draft. That 20-day window before the NBA regular season ends, eyeballs on national TV games in the playoffs, they're paying attention to those things. Not to say they're not paying attention all year, but maybe folks at the higher level from an executive standpoint, they sink their teeth into it too. So something to keep in mind. More information to come if indeed Maine is hosting a first-round playoff game or just playoff games in general, if they end up being a top 2 seed and they're going to bye in the first round. Keep it locked into MaineCeltics.com. Also, the Maine social channels, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever it's called. Find information there as well. So stay on top of those things. More information to come on possible playoff tickets, when the times of the games will be. And, of course, we will have broadcast coverage as well. Definitely on the radio side, 96.3, The Big Jab. Thanks again to our guest this week, Joe Wieskamp, on episode 7 of the Maine Celtics podcast. For Chris Whitney, Brendan Glasheen, thanks to all of you who have tuned in all season. Please subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the Maine Celtics YouTube channel. I'm sure we will do this again when the playoffs near and when the playoffs get here. So be sure to join us. Thanks for watching the Maine Celtics podcast, and we'll talk to you again real soon.